legal stalwarts and an issue which carries interest not only for the students of law, lawyers, professors, judges, but as well as the common man. Because as the topic itself says, it's a public interest litigation as well as public law litigation. Public, when the word public comes itself, it itself connotes that it is beyond one's own individual rights. Amongst us, we have Justice C.K. Thakur. We all know the judgments as a judge of the Gujarat High Court, then being a Chief Justice of Himachal High Court, Maharashtra High Court, and then as a Supreme Court judge. They covered different spectrums of life and which affected large number of individuals and the public at large. Public interest litigation, we all know, it is more based upon, we don't go on the principle of the locus standi as such, as to how, rather to the contrary, it is that the person who is espousing the interest should not have interest in that, and he's taking the perspective of a larger public. And similarly, public law, we all know, has its wider connotations as such. Once we have stalwarts amongst us, except for the introduction part as such, we will request the speakers to take the different issues. We always have tried to come out with the different platforms in a different way. Sometimes it has been a monologue, a keynote speaker speaking itself. Sometimes it has been an interactive session. And today, amongst us, we have two stalwarts and two topics. So primarily, Justice C.K. Thakur will be speaking upon the perspectives of public interest litigation, and then Mr. Aseem Pandya would be speaking upon the perspectives of public law litigation. As the followers who are following the Beyond Law CLC know it very well that Mr. Aseem Pandya had earlier been on the platform, and that perspectives given by him were eye-opening, not to, as the purposes of eye-opening, I would say, to the legal minds as well. And Mr. Pandya has also been participating in few of the webinars wherein we have been taking in certain inputs as an active participant, which shows that he loves to give his insights particularly, and once an important subject comes into being, he joins us and gives his input. Mr. C.K. Thakur, as in the invite itself and otherwise, those who have joined us on the Facebook also, know it very well that he's a multifaceted personality who has created his niche as a lawyer, a part-time lecturer, and as an author. He had been Chief Justice of two places, that is Himachal Pradesh, Maharashtra, and then he had donned the highest seat of Supreme Court of India. And he had also been a governor of Maharashtra for a short time. Keeping in view that he has been authors of Administrative Law, Code of Civil Procedure, we requested Honorable Mr. Justice C.K. Thakur to give his insights. We thought that reading books gives a different way, but hearing and visually seeing from a person who is having immense legal knowledge is going to give an immense flip to the mind. And during this lockdown, as we always say, that having knowledge from the persons of stature of Mr. C.K. Thakur and Mr. Aseem Pandya will always be enriching and will always be embedded in the minds of a person who is participating in these webinars. Mr. C.K. Thakur, as we see, it's a very rare occasion one can make a mark as a lawyer, as a lecturer, as a judge, and then writing books. As well as on the administrative side, we all know that the judges are also do immense work on the administrative side, and being a governor, that gives a different flip. So person who is having such immense knowledge, and then Mr. Pandya, who has been a former president of the Gujarat Bar. So administrative skills as well as the legal knowledge, combination on a vital subject which goes to the root of the matter, And as we all know, public interest litigation and public law litigation, all high courts as well as the Supreme Court are invariably having these various litigations. But what are the scopes? What are the, how they have been a journey? Having insights from such people would be actually very enriching and engaging, because both the speakers are very erudite speakers. Over to you, Honorable Mr. Justice C.K. Thakur. We are obliged that you accepted our invitation, and we are all looking forward for having a good insights from your good self. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Pandya
and I was just one line, sir. I just missed out that Mr. Pandya is also an author. So a very no, it's, I just realized that a common factor between the two speakers is that both are writers as well as immense knowledge. That gives a different flip. So it would not have been fair once we know that you have such a statement.
One thing, Mr. Vikas, that I am not of that stature like Justice C.K. Thakur, who has received acclaims from Lord Denning also for his work. So his stature is entirely different. I cannot compare myself. I am too junior to him. And in fact, I have emulated many things from him. I have learned many things from him when he was a lawyer. He was sitting in the last chairs of the courtroom and he would keep on writing. So from that I have learned, and I have inculcated habit of working during the court hours also. So that is how I am too junior and uncomparable.
No, but the question is, once if you're trying to learn, that is an immense thing. That if one watches someone and then you learn also, that is an immense thing, which is an inspiration for not only for a person like us, but even for the participants who are on the platform as well as on the Facebook. Thank you to both of you for accepting our invite. Over to you, Justice C.K. Thakur.
First of all, let me congratulate you for holding this very important conference with regard to important subjects. Let me lodge a caveat first, that as Mr. Pandya said, and you have also said, we may say and we may proceed on the basis that here we all are students of law. See, whatever may be my knowledge, I will also be getting something from you. Maybe that you may be able to get something from me, but it is reciprocal. And I am indeed happy that I am among you. As far as the subject is concerned, public interest litigation, it is very important and a very interesting subject. Courts are there since many years. Public interest litigation in that sense is comparatively new one. Otherwise, there was adversarial jurisdiction and adversarial system in which A will file a suit or A will go to a court of law making some complaint against B. B will try to defend himself and the court will pass an appropriate order. It may be traditional or Crown's court, it may be tribunal, or it may be some quasi-judicial authority. Their concepts were also very clear. Say, for example, normally person aggrieved or person dissatisfied or person who has some grievance against the other will go to a court of law or authority and will make his submission before the authority and try to get relief from the opposite party. Public interest litigation in that sense is totally different. And mind well, first of all, which is which can be said to be a sine qua non, is the person himself is not interested personally. He has no doubt interest, but the interest is for public at large. And hence, he may not be aggrieved person. And yet, court of law will hear him if he has some grievance, which would say benefit the society, part of the society or so. As far as India, in USA and other countries also such litigation is there. As I had told you earlier, only aggrieved person could go to a court of law. There were certain exceptions. Say, for example, in certain circumstances, a person may not be able to approach the court. He is, say, either minor or unable to take care of himself, or it may be, say, something like preventive detention or imprisonment. In such cases, even next friend or other person can also go to a court of law, say, stating that this is the position and therefore relief may be granted. But otherwise, a person will have to go personally, file a petition or file a suit or file an appropriate application for ventilation of his grievances. In 1979, probably for the first time, that Justice M.P. Thakkar read some news in the newspaper that a widow of an employee of ONGC who died during dependency of during his service and was therefore entitled to some say pensionary benefits. Those benefits were not awarded to the widow. The letter was treated as writ petition. In Gujarat High Court, it is known as special civil application. Rest, it is known as writ petition. It was registered as writ petition, and notice was issued. Of course, it was immediate. The payment was immediately made. But as it is said by, say, several, say judicial stalwarts, that he could be considered to be founding father of public interest litigation. As far as Supreme Court is concerned, it is said that for the first time, public interest litigation was when judges transferred Gupta's case, SP Gupta's case, that some judges were transferred, some judges were not confirmed, who were appointed as additional judges, and the members of the bar association had filed the petition, and the question before the court was whether such a petition was maintainable or not. The court held that the petition was maintainable. It was really in the nature of public interest litigation, and hence such a petition could be entertained by a court of law. In fact, there are certain matters in which a court of law may entertain, say, for example, in public nuisance. If you are aware, in public nuisance, the settled law is that if it is a private nuisance, then obviously a person aggrieved can go to a court of law and may, say, obtain appropriate order. But if it is public nuisance, then in that case, he will have to show that over and above general nuisance, he has suffered special damage. And if special damage is not suffered by him, then in that case, petition would not be maintainable at his instance. In England, before Lord Denning, a petition came by a professor. A pornographic film was shown on TV, and the professor filed a petition stating that I am in my house and I am staying not only with my wife, but my mother, my sister, my daughter. And if such pornographic films are shown, then in that case, some relief must be granted to me, and appropriate orders should be passed. On behalf of the Crown, say, preliminary contention was raised that he is not able to convince the court that some special damage or special injury has been sustained by him. And Lord Denning had no difficulty in rejecting the contention, saying that if he has not suffered injury, then none has suffered any injury. And he has custody, and he can certainly put his grievance before the court. So as far as India is concerned, we have always stated and settled principle is that in such cases, a person can go to a court of law. Now, I may not go to several judgments, but some of the judgments I may say with regard to public interest litigation, as I had told you that SP Gupta's case, then in Asiad case, that construction of several playgrounds in 1982 at Delhi, and no minimum wages were paid to the laborers, and the petition was filed. And mind you, petition was filed directly in the Supreme Court. Normally, in such cases, Supreme Court would say that go to High Court and get appropriate remedy, appropriate relief. And if you are not able to get it, then come here in the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court said that it is violative of Article 14 also. It is violative of Article 16 also. And in such circumstances, the court granted relief. In ragging case, Maharashtra, that medical college from Himachal Pradesh, the court said that we will grant relief. Again from Himachal, that whether say that construction of road can be in hilly area can be said to be part and parcel of Article 21, because Article 21 earlier it was strictly construed, but thereafter it was liberally construed, and it is said that in hilly area good road system and say bridge was not there, so construction of bridge was considered to be part and parcel of public interest. And if for such matter, if any person can come to a court of law making grievance, then the court will hear the matter and pass an appropriate order. Similarly, with regard to Bandhua Mukti Morcha, Bhopal Gas, and then Olga Tennis. Olga Tennis also, you must be aware, say hutment dwellers. And it is said that they have right of life, and Article 21 is very much there. And Article 21 is, you know, it is very liberally construed, including, it is said that it is not, say, animal existence, but a person must live life as a human being. And in such circumstances, appropriate relief can be granted. There were several cases in which powers were abused by authorities. Say, for example, in Shivaji Rao Patil's case, the chief minister's daughter appeared in MBBS examination, and probably she obtained rank 1. And it was said that there was something which had, say, illegality had been committed. And when the matter went to the court, it was said that yes, there was, say, illegalities and irregularities, and court would hear the matter. In DC Vadhwa's case, from time to time, ordinances were issued and no legislation was passed. And the court said that you cannot run government by issuing ordinance. And a professor of law can go to a court of law and get an appropriate relief. Ratlam municipality, with regard to, say, gutter and sanitation, proper sanitation, the court held that yes, a person can go to a court of law and can obtain appropriate relief. You also must be aware that in accident cases, what was happened was that first, whenever you go to a hospital, they say that if it is accident case, then first there must be Panchanama, there must be, say, police complaint, and thereafter only we will treat the patient. Now, in many cases, it was held to be fatal. The reason is that by the time police officer or police authorities come there and get the complaint and or recorded it, meanwhile the person may die. The court said that no, first all hospital authorities are bound to treat the patient so that human life is not lost. Then in D.K. Basu, retired judge's case, in that president of the Retired Judges Association, he went to the court of law and said that as far as arrest is concerned, police authorities may take appropriate action and may make arrest possible. But in such cases, some via media must be found out, and some guidelines also must be provided. Similarly, when a judicial officer, in Nadiad, the judicial officer's case, the judge was handcuffed and he was taken to, say, before media. The court said that no, it cannot be done, and certain parameters and certain guidelines were provided. In pollution matters also, several orders had been passed by the court. And even with regard to enforcement, orders have been issued. At the same time, one must also keep in mind an important fact. That is that the power or the process should not be misused. There should not be abuse of process of law. And many cases had come before the court in which it has been held that it was virtually not public interest litigation, but private interest litigation, or some individual right, or some revenge was there. In fact, when I was in the Supreme Court, one case came before our bench also, and it was said that the contract was given to A, which was illegal. And I have nothing so far as personal interest is concerned. And since the public exchequer has suffered, I am before the court. High Court had dismissed the petition, and the SLP was filed, which came before us, before the Supreme Court. In the affidavit in reply filed by the other side, to whom contract was given, it was stated that, sir, this is in fact so-and-so was one of the competitors. His bid was not accepted, my bid was accepted, and therefore at his instance, the present proceedings have been initiated. And therefore it cannot be said to be public interest litigation. In affidavit itself, he has produced some bills, some vouchers, and some invoices that as far as the appointment of lawyers for fighting the case is concerned before the High Court as well as before the Supreme Court, the payment was made by the opposite party. And those vouchers were shown to the High Court as also to the Supreme Court. Now, obviously, in these circumstances, it cannot be said that it was public interest litigation. In several cases, it has come that either political opponents or your, say, other parties, they come to a court of law. And the court will have to be very careful. Then it is also necessary to bear in mind, particularly by courts, that whether court would be able to enforce those orders. See, main thing which will have to be done is, and that is the principle of judicial review, which has been accepted in India. As far as you know that as far as doctrine of judicial review is concerned, it is only in United States of America where even law also can be declared as unconstitutional. Similarly, in India. Now, one of the principles is that there must be judicially measurable standards for enforcement of orders passed by competent courts. So, whenever an order is passed by a court, either in, say adversarial litigation or in public interest litigation, court will have to bear in mind that it can be implemented, it can be enforced. And if it is not enforced or if it is not implemented, we will be able to take some steps, including steps of, say, by contempt of court. Now, in one case, a short order was passed by one High Court, and it is said that government is directed to remove all corruption in all departments. When the matter went to the Supreme Court said that such orders cannot be passed. The reason is that everybody would agree that there should be no corruption in any department of government. But if you pass an order that there should not be corruption in any department and all departments are directed to take appropriate steps, what steps are to be taken? One. Secondly, if steps are not taken, and if the court is of the opinion that no proper steps are taken, what will be done? What will be done by the by these courts? Whether any contempt notice can be issued, whether any direction can be issued. In such matters, the courts have held, therefore, that no, you will have to bear in mind that such orders are to be passed which can be implemented. As I had told you, say, for example, accident cases, that yes, first you will have to treat the patient. All right, treat. Therefore, that order can be implemented. Similarly, you will have to make payment. Then, all right, make the payment. Say, for example, bandhas and that hartals and everything, it should not be done. Yes, if it is done, police authorities will take care of it and say that no, you cannot do it. Or if you want that there is some right so far as the fundamental right so far as opposition is concerned, but then you cannot hold the entire road or entire area and say that no, we will not allow you to go from this place anywhere else. No, that cannot be done. And it can be implemented by police force. So all these matters will have to be kept in mind. And if it is done, then no doubt about it that as far as the public interest litigation is concerned, it would be very, say, useful, and it would be in the larger interest of society, and proper administration would be there. And in absence of such guidelines, in absence of such parameters, and in absence of, say, enforceability, it would create several problems which may not be able to be dealt with by the authority. So these are the fundamental principles of public interest litigation, which every court, including the final court, will have to bear in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As Mr. Pandya said, that we are all humbled the way, the tremendous knowledge you have. The way you explained the subtle difference in a short time, difference between a public interest litigation, the private interest litigation, what is adversarial litigation, and taking us back and forward to what is the law and how it has developed, and how taking into consideration the law Denning, etc. We are actually enlightened the way you have illuminated the entire webinar. Now I would request Mr. Aseem Pandya, again, who is, as I said, prolific speaker, having immense knowledge on the constitution law, and he has written books also, to take the webinar forward to give the insights on public law litigation. And I will just explain to the participants that after Mr. Pandya's insights having been given, we will be taking the question and answers. The questions can be posted on the chat box, and both the speakers have been kind enough to give their consent that they would give the insights. Both would be giving their insights, since it is a common question which can be dealt with. Over to you, Mr. Pandya.
Yes. Good evening to all. First of all, let me express that I am indeed honored and I feel privileged that today I am sharing a platform with a person like Honorable Justice C.K. Thakkar, who is a renowned author, undoubtedly a renowned author. He is considered to be a jurist and a former judge, you obviously know. So it is, again, I may express special thanks to you and Beyond Law CLC and Punjab Law University for giving me this opportunity. Honorable Justice Thakkar has vividly explained the parameters of public interest litigation. I will therefore not venture to add something, but I will just try to recap everything in a short time, that what are the phases through which public interest litigation has passed. We will have to divide this era of public interest litigation from 1975 to 85, then 1985 to 2000, and 2000 to 2010, because 2010 is again a very landmark judgment has been delivered by the Honorable Supreme Court, Honorable Justice Dalvir Bhandari in Balwant Singh Chaupals versus State of Uttaranchal, which is reported in AIR 2010, Supreme Court, page 2550. So now it is Uttarakhand, but it was when it was filed. So there again, a separate line has been drawn in what cases public interest litigation will have to be encouraged and where it is to be weeded out. So these three eras through which the public interest has passed, public interest litigation has passed. Now, traditionally, as Justice Thakkar said that if a person wants to approach the court, he needs to point out that his personal rights have been violated or he has been personally injured. So that is a traditional litigation. Now there is another feature which is also there in CPC, that is representative action. So representative action is provided under Order 1, Rule 8, where a class of person who is entitled to move a court of law in a representative capacity, and there is a different procedure prescribed that he will have to seek leave of the court, then advertisement will have to be given so all stakeholders can participate, and ultimately that judgment would be binding. So we are not also talking about this representative action, which is entirely a different kind of litigation. Our focus is mainly on public interest litigation and public law litigation. Public law litigation, which I am going to address a little later because I just add few things and then immediately I will try to cover that issue, public law litigation, which is comparative and unfamiliar phrase, because we are aware of public interest litigation, but we are not that familiar with this phrase, that is public law litigation. So I will try to broadly distinguish between public interest litigation and public law litigation. But before that, I will just give a brief idea through which this entire rule of locus standi has been liberalized. It started from the judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court in M.B. Dabholkar's case versus Maharashtra Bar Council's case. In that, Justice Krishna Iyer liberalized the rules pertaining to standing of the State Bar Council. It was an issue of Section 38 of the Advocates Act, wherein limited rights were provided. Only person aggrieved can approach, or Advocate General or Attorney General can approach Supreme Court. In this case, disciplinary action was taken by the State Bar Council, but Bar Council of India reversed the findings of the State Bar Council. And ultimately, the State Bar Council had to approach under Section 38. And the question was whether State Bar Council would have a locus standi or not. In that case, Justice Krishna Iyer started liberalizing the concept of locus standi. Thereafter, he consistently, in other cases, Sunil Batra's case, Prem Shankar Shukla's case, then in R. Sadanandam's case, 1980 Supreme Court judgment, where the person who was not a victim, but a relative of the victim, he wanted to challenge the acquittal of a person by the High Court. So he approached by way of special leave. And the issue arose that in ordinary cases of criminal cases, the state government or the accused, they are the only main stakeholders, and they have to carry the matters before the Supreme Court or the higher courts. So there also, Justice Krishna Iyer recognized the standing of the victim, relative of the victim. He said that we cannot shut the doors of the court to such person, because ultimately what is to be done is justice to the person. So again, he did not exit to the narrow aspect of the locus standi. In the meantime, there was one case where very narrow approach on the locus standi was taken. That was Jashbhai Motibhai Desai versus Roshan Kumar. It is reported in AIR 1976, Supreme Court, I think page 577, where like Gloucester Grammar School's case in England, that some rival filed a petition challenging that the cinema license which has been given to the licensed other person was invalid, and it was in abuse of the power this was given. And the issue was whether they rival businessman can challenge the order granting cinema license to other rival. The Supreme Court examined the concept of locus standi, and it did not expanded the concept of locus standi, saying that this rival has no business to challenge the permission granted to the another rival. But later on in 1981, Fertilizer Kamgar Union's case, again by Justice Krishna Iyer, and it is reported in AIR 1981, Supreme Court, page 344, where the question was of the locus standi of the union, workers' union. They challenged the action of the management of selling the parts and machinery of the company at the throwaway price, obsolete machineries, and their outstandings remained due to be paid, and therefore they said that if this is allowed, virtually we would be affected, we will be deprived of our rights to receive the appropriate compensation or the amount which is outstanding from the management. In that case, Justice Krishna Iyer very succinctly said that we have to now broaden the concept of locus standi, and we should try to encourage persons who are genuinely pursuing the litigation for the interest of a class of persons or a public at large. Then we should not shut down the doors at the threshold, and we will have to examine the grievance, genuineness of the grievance, and only if the grievance is not found to be genuine, then it has to be a petition has to be rejected. But the doors of the court will not be ajar for such litigants, and they will not be told at the threshold that we will not hear you because you have no locus standi. So court insisted that we should try to examine what is the cause which is being brought before the Supreme Court or the High Court, and if the cause is genuine, then and secondly, if the person is bona fide pursuing litigation, he is not a wayfarer, he is not a busybody, he is not a meddlesome person, then if these three criteria are satisfied, then in that event, if a person is bona fide pursuing a grievance, then it has to be encouraged, and we cannot shut down the doors of the court to such person. And then he has elaborated from legal injury or personal injury to sufficient interest. Usually, as I said that, or Justice Thakkar said that in ordinary litigation, person should have a legal interest or genuine interest. Now the law has been expanded to mean that the law does not insist that person who would have a legal interest, even if he is a reasonable or sufficient interest, and if he is pursuing litigation bona fide, then in that case, it should not be discouraged. Such litigation has to be encouraged, because the rule of law is our constitutional principle, and it is the duty of the High Courts and the Supreme Court, being sentinel on the qui vive of the fundamental rights. It is the duty of the Constitutional Court to see that the large masses or the poor who are not afforded fundamental rights, who are not extended the benefit of fundamental rights, are given proper fundamental rights. So I divided, first phase is, that is 1975 to 1985, that saw mainly litigation, public interest litigations pertaining to slum dwellers, pavement dwellers, the prisoners' rights of women in the mental asylums, rights of children, exploitation of children. All such cases were usually, I'm not saying that other kinds of PILs were not filed in those days, but these were the main cases which were filed during 1975 to 85, and the court insisted broadening of the concept of locus standi, and this kind of cases were encouraged. The second phase was 1985 onwards, up to 2000, that saw tremendous inflow of public interest litigation in respect of environmental issues. You will see about 15 cases registered in the name of Mr. MC Mehta versus Union of India or some other party. So oleum gas leakage case, then Kanpur tanneries case. So all there, they were in the nature of public interest litigation. And there the court has expanded the concept of Article 21, saying that the right to have pollution-free air or pollution-free environment is flowing from Article 21, and therefore, in the larger interest of public, such petitions were entertained. And then again, during this case, as Justice Thakkar said, that there was a judgment from DAV College, Himachal Pradesh, in respect of, I think, ragging and such other issues were also taken into consideration by the Supreme Court. But as I said, that largely during this period, mainly matters pertaining to environmental laws were main in focus before the High Courts or the Supreme Court of India. And again, after 91 onwards, the public interest litigation was started being abused by number of persons. In the beautiful veil of public interest litigation, people started um, and filing private interest litigation. So PIL, again, the abbreviation is PIL. Either it is a private interest litigation, it is a political interest litigation. Sometimes it was in the nature of publicity interest litigation. So person was simply interested in his publicity. He was no more genuinely concerned in the cause which was brought before the court. So it was either a publicity stunt, it was a political, some politician was behind the public interest litigation, or it was a paisa income litigation. So if abbreviation of all these phrases are taken, they would say it is PIL, but the connotations are different, and the persons who were working behind them were different. So inflow of such cases started coming to the courts, and judicial time started being wasted on such frivolous litigations. So from H.S. Chaudhary versus Janata Dal, 1992 onwards, Supreme Court become cautious that what kind of litigations will be entertained as public interest litigation. They started weeding out that we would not end as litigations which is either political interest litigation or publicity stunt or paisa income litigation, because people started blackmailing by using this very important tool which was meant to be used for the downtrodden and large segment of society who were not able to have access to justice in qualitative terms. So the instrument which was evolved, let me make it clear that under the constitution, if you go by article 226 or 32, there is no reference of public interest litigation. It is the craftsmanship of judges and creativity of judges by which they have broadened the concept of locus standi, and then they have evolved this very useful tool to extend the fundamental rights to the downtrodden. Now, when it was found to be being abused or misused, they became very cautious approach has started. So from 1992 onwards, the cautious approach started. Then in some cases, it was found that lawyers were indulging into frivolous litigations. And therefore, Supreme Court and in Dattaraj Nathuji Thavre's case, Honorable Supreme Court made it clear that lawyers should not indulge into frivolous litigations, vexatious litigation in the garb of public interest litigation. They should not indulge into publicity litigation. And when such litigations are filed, it brings disgrace to our profession. And therefore, it has been recommended to the Bar Council of India that lawyers should not indulge into vexatious litigation, and they should not become party to the public interest litigation, because we have seen number of lawyers filing public interest litigation in personal capacity. One such instance I will give you, probably you might be aware of the case of Sanjeev Bhatnagar versus Union of India, where he sought declaration that from national anthem, the word Sindh should be omitted, because Sindh had become part of Pakistan, and when we sing national anthem, we are not supposed to part which is not within the Indian territory. Then Supreme Court judicial time was wasted in going to the Constituent Assembly debates, and ultimately it was found by the Supreme Court of India that even Constituent Assembly sung this national anthem having the word Sindh in it, and they even did not object, because it is written by somebody, a renowned person, and we are not supposed to meddle with such a national anthem. And ultimately, the petition filed by Sanjeev Bhatnagar was dismissed with the cost of 10,000. Now I am coming to the last phase, that is 2010 onwards. Probably this is a judgment after Honorable Justice C.K. Thakkar retired. That is in Balwant Singh Chaupal's case. Justice Dalbir Bhandari's very detailed judgment. I would exhort everyone to read this judgment, because it details out every phase of public interest litigation, and he has expressed the necessity to weed out frivolous public interest litigation. In this judgment, the Honorable Supreme Court said that we should now make conscious endeavor to see that our judicial time, which is very precious, is not wasted in entertaining frivolous litigation. So parameters have been laid down in this judgment, and this judgment was directed to be circulated to every high court registry, to frame appropriate rules relating to public interest litigation, so that when public interest litigation is filed before the court would be able to judge whether there is genuine interest, or it is a publicity stunt or a political interest litigation. So in the line of the judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court in Balwant Singh Chappal's case versus State of Uttaranchal, every high court has now framed PIL rules. And these every high court has provided a format of filing public interest litigation, where first of all, what is necessary is that the person who is approaching has to point out his credentials. How many public interest litigation has he filed in the past? Whether this is a first venture, or he has espoused the causes of public at large in the past also. He has to point out who is going to bear the cost of the public interest litigation, because that is very important aspect to find out who is behind the public interest litigation. Now, we have seen recently that in public interest litigation, grand lawyers who are charging fees in lakhs of rupees, more than 10 lakhs rupees per day per appearance, they have started appearing. Then the question arises, the court has to pose a question to themselves, that who are behind these persons? Are they appearing pro bono? If they are appearing pro bono, then they should make it clear that they are appearing pro bono. Otherwise, it is necessary to find out that who is funding this litigation. So under the PIL rules now, the credentials has to be established. Who is bearing the cost of the public interest litigation is to be stated. Then, because of the filing of public interest litigation, frivolous litigation, whether in the past any cost has been imposed by the court or not, any court, that is also now required to be stated in the petition, and whether the applicant who is approaching the court has been ever held guilty for contempt of court or not. That is also required to be stated in the petition. So now a set format has been prescribed under the every high court rules, and it should be in tune with, and when epistolary jurisdiction can be, or high court can suo motu exercise contempt, public interest litigation jurisdiction, has been also narrated in the rules that in category A to H, the high court would be justified in entertaining public interest litigation suo motu. So there is a little bit regulation on the high court judge's discretion also. Now that discretion is not too wide, of course, since they are exercising constitutional powers, their discretion cannot be fettered by rules, but these rules definitely operate as guidelines, and they will have to try to entertain suo motu petitions in tune with these rules, PIL rules, that are framed pursuant to the Balwant Chappal's case. Now, Balwant Chappal's case, I may just give in 2 minutes. It was a case where the petitioner, who was a lawyer again, he had challenged the appointment of the Advocate General who was appointed in State of Uttaranchal, saying that the state government is not empowered to appoint any person as an Advocate General who has crossed the age of 62. And the reason which was canvassed is that for becoming Advocate General, the qualification is that of a High Court judge. And once High Court judge is not entitled to have office or continue in office after 62 years of age, as a necessary corollary, appointment of Advocate General after 62 years was unwarranted. The Supreme Court was again, their judicial time was wasted. A notice was issued to the lawyer concerned who had filed litigation before the Uttaranchal court at Nainital, and against interim order, the matter went before the Supreme Court. So notice was issued to that lawyer. The lawyer chose not to remain present, and then Supreme Court said that they have examined the past precedents on this issue, because this issue was no more res integra. This issue was long back decided by the Supreme Court and many high courts, and therefore the Supreme Court settled that advocate with the cost of 1 lakh rupees. So now the tendency is to curb frivolous litigation. At the same time, Justice Dalbir Bhandari has made it clear that we are not averse to the public interest litigation. Do not misunderstand us. We are keen. We want to see that public interest litigation is used as a genuine tool to extend the fundamental rights to the citizens of India who are unable to approach court, Supreme Court or the High Court because of their poverty, their illiteracy, because of lack of financial means or knowledge. If they are unable, then the court's doors are open. So this is how public interest litigation has been viewed. Now, just in 10 minutes, Mr. Vikas, there is time, enough time?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. So 10 minutes, just Honorable Justice Thakkar may bear with me. I may take a little 10 minutes more.
Yes, I have no problem.
Okay. Now, public law litigation, as I said, that it's a unfamiliar phrase. This phrase has been used by Honorable Justice S.B. Sinha in the case of Raju Ram Singh Vasve versus Mahesh Devrao Bhivapurkar. It is reported in AIR 2008, Supreme Court Supplementary, page 514. Now, the case was about the issuance of the caste certificate to certain persons. The certain persons were claiming that they were belonging to Koshti caste, and which was a subcaste of Halba or Halbi caste. And the committee of backward or SC/ST committee did not recognize the status of that person. That person approached the High Court, and ultimately the co-employee challenged the caste certificate issued by the co-employee approached the Supreme Court against the order of the High Court, because High Court set aside the order of the caste committee. So in that case, the first issue which was raised, that what is the locus standi of the co-employee. Then Supreme Court said that, okay, let us for the time being forget about the locus standi. Of course, he is genuinely pursuing, he is slightly interested in it, because issuance of the caste certificate to person who is not eligible would be a constitutional fraud. It would be contrary to the constitutional provisions. Therefore, even though it may not be treated as, it was a SLP, the Supreme Court said that it may not be treated as PIL, but we would treat it as a public law litigation. So concept of public law litigation, of course, it is a very old concept, but to my knowledge, it has been specifically used in this case by Honorable Justice S.B. Sinha, that there is something like a public law litigation also. Public interest litigation, we understand. But public law litigation is slightly different. Of course, I would agree to it that it is a branch or tributary of the same river, that is public interest litigation. But what is the importance of public law litigation, that I would like to emphasize, because of the proliferation of the administrative law, executive powers have been expanded to such an extent that our every activity from cradle to grave, as D. Smith in his book has said, that from cradle to grave, every activity, every sphere of activity, our activity is in the hands of the executive. Now, sometimes the decision of the administrator or executive individually affects. Then there is no problem. We can directly go to the court because we are personally injured. So there is no question on the question of locus standi. But there are large number of decisions which are taken by the executive or administrator by abusing the power in breach of the doctrine of public trust, where individually he might be slightly interested. He may not be directly, his interest may be sufficient, but he is not directly, he is one of the persons who is slightly affected by the action of the administrator. That kind of litigation I am describing, it to be a public interest litigation. I'm sorry, public law litigation. So there is a slight distinction between public interest litigation and public law litigation, which I would suggest that, or all lawyers who are hearing me, that they should take up this issue whenever appropriate proceedings is raised, comes before him, before the court concerned, and should try to elaborate this concept of public law litigation. Now I will try to elaborate this concept of public law litigation. Now PIL and public interest litigation, public law litigation. Public interest litigation, when a person approaches, he is usually not concerned with the outcome of the litigation. He is filing petition. He is not personally interested at all, not slightest interest. He is simply interested in vindicating the fundamental rights of downtrodden persons, the poor masses of little Indians, who are described by Honorable Justice Krishna Iyer as little Indians, or persons because of their incapacity, like prisoners languishing in jail, they are unable to approach. So in such cases, one NGO or one person who is really interested in welfare of such would bring litigation, and he is not concerned with the outcome. So he is acting as a stranger, absolutely, but court is recognizing his locus standi because he is bringing a genuine cause. Now take a case where a person is affected by an administrative decision, not individually, but in common. His grievance is not his individual grievance, but it is representing a class of persons. Now, first illustration I will give you, that would be of Bangalore Medical Trust versus B.S. Mudappa's case. That is reported in AIR 1991 Supreme Court, page 1902. Now, in this case, interestingly, under the town planning scheme, a particular plot was reserved for a garden or playground. Now, at the instance of the state government, the Bangalore Development Authority gave this plot, which was reserved for garden and playground, to a hospital, private hospital. And therefore, the persons who are resident, they challenge the action of the executive who gave this particular piece of land. So now appreciate this aspect of public law litigation. It is not genuinely a public interest litigation because a very small segment who are residing in that particular locality are affected. And secondly, the person who is approaching cannot be considered to be simply a stranger. He is also interested in the outcome to some extent. He has at least sufficient interest to see that the land which is set apart under the town planning scheme for garden purpose is retained as garden and playground for the general benefit of the public at large. Now when this happens and it is given as a state largesse to a private benefit by depriving a large segment of public from the same locality, whether court can say that, no, this is not a public interest litigation because you are interested, then what I say that public law litigation, this doctrine or this tributary will have to be expanded. In fact, without naming this as a public law litigation, the Supreme Court approved the standing of the local residents who were staying in, and they said that the decision of the state government and the Bangalore Development Authority was contrary to the town planning scheme. Once the town planning scheme earmarks a plot for a particular purpose, the authority cannot simply give it for a different purpose and change the purpose without changing the town planning scheme, because there is a detailed procedure laid out in the Town Planning Act, every provincial town planning act, where is detailed procedure is there. Therefore, so long as this procedure is not undertaken, you cannot simply give this land for a private nursing home and private benefit. So this is the nature of public law litigation. So as I said, that first is that third party in public interest litigation, he is not interested in the outcome, whereas in the public law litigation, he might be slightly interested in the outcome of the litigation. The second distinction, these distinctions are nowhere found in the books. I have just tried to, for understanding, I have tried to bring this distinction to the august audience. I am just now saying that now what would be the challenge in the public interest litigation? In public interest litigation, usually it is for vindication of the right, fundamental rights or constitutional rights. A large segment who is deprived of, so it is for seeking enforcement of the fundamental rights. As Honorable Justice C.K. Thakkar said that Article 21 does not mean mere animal existence. It is something beyond. Person has to be treated as a human being. So when a public interest litigation is filed, it is on account of inaction in extending the benefit of fundamental right. It is on account of omission on the part of the state or instrumentality of the state in enforcing the fundamental right or extending the, or it is because of the negligence of the authority or instrumentality in providing these basic human rights to the large segment of society. So in that case, they would be seeking enforcement of the fundamental right. What is the distinction in public law litigation? In public law litigation, what is challenge is a decision of the authority. Usually, there may be cases where overlapping might be there. But ordinarily in public law litigation, as I said, the decision of the BDA, Bangalore Development Authority, or the state government which had recommended granting this plot reserved for garden to a private hospital. So there is a decision, and what is challenge is decision, and what is insisted or which is the controversy is abuse of power. Where there is abuse of power, or where there is a breach of public trust doctrine. You are all aware that all executive powers or administrative powers are to be exercised for public benefit, public good. It cannot be used for private benefit. It cannot be used for giving a benefit to a private individual. So these public duties or public power is rested on the public trust doctrine. And if there is a breach of the doctrine, then that decision is liable to be set aside on the ground of abuse of power, mala fide exercise of power, or violation or breach of public trust doctrine. So in the public law litigation, there would be a decision. Now, kindly compare that what would be the final relief in public interest litigation. In public interest litigation, the final relief would be directing the authority to extend the benefit. Suppose speedy disposal issue is there, speedy trial, that court would issue appropriate direction that speedy disposal or speedy trial is integral part of Article 21, and therefore it will direct that expeditious disposal should be there. So it would be towards enforcement of the fundamental right. Whereas in public law litigation, the decision of the authority will be quashed and set aside. So this is how I have tried to bring distinction. And one more distinction is that ordinarily PIL involves violation of the fundamental right, whereas public law litigation is concerned with the abuse of power and breach of the public trust doctrine. Now, what happens? Suppose, let us assume that everyone, if the locus standi of a person who is genuinely pursuing litigation is denied, or he is at the threshold said that, okay, you are not consent, and we will not encourage litigation who is not prejudicially affected, whose legal rights are not affected, then what would happen? It would be detrimental to good governance. As I said that every administrator is a repository of powers to be exercised in public trust. And suppose if that power is abused, then every individual or a ratepayer or taxpayer is entitled to approach the court with a genuine grievance that in this case, this is the abuse of the power and this is how the large segment is affected, and I may also be to some extent interested in this. So that would not be treated as a public interest litigation in that strict sense, and it would be public law litigation. I give one another instance and three instances of very remote past. First, which would interest Mr. Vikas, that is arising from Chandigarh itself, that Institute of Law versus Neeraj Sharma. You might be aware of this judgment. In this case, the allotment of a land of about 5.75 acres in sector 38 to Institute of Law was given. The proposal moved in such a haste, within a few days it was sanctioned, and it was on a 99 years lease. 33 years lease at first instance, it is renewable 3 times more. And the lease rent was about 999. So in this case, Mr. Neeraj Sharma, who happened to be a resident of Punjab and taxpayer, challenged the decision of allotment of this land in disregard of the public duty. And the first question is, usually we frequently come across this kind of question either from honorable judges or from the opponent. Time and again, we are pitted with this question that you have no locus standi. So this session is going to be very useful to overcome such arguments, that wherever there is an abuse of public power, as a citizen, as a taxpayer, you cannot be said no. As a taxpayer, you have a legal interest, sufficient interest. Only thing is required to be is that you are not a busybody, you are not a meddlesome person, interloper or wayfarer. Only if these things are pointed out, then again there is another mode adopted in some cases. Suppose grievance is genuine, but the person who is bringing this cause is not genuine. Then court can certainly say that, okay, cause is genuine, we will not recognize this petitioner, we will appoint amicus curiae. And then cause can be examined. So who brings action, that is irrelevant in my view, personal view. If a person has a sufficient interest, as I said that in Neeraj Sharma's case, Institute of Law, merely because he was a taxpayer of Punjab and he was a resident of probably Chandigarh, his locus standi was accepted, and Supreme Court said that for good governance, because this is our constitutional principles, that every authority will have to act in accordance with the constitutional principles. If they have acted arbitrary in violation of Article 14, then obviously court is entitled to see the grievance at the instance of anyone who is coming before the court. Now, these are the two main instances pertaining to public law litigation. Of course, it is not described as public law litigation. They have been treated as public interest litigation, but my endeavor is to find a way out that we will have to now start making slight deviation or distinction between a pure public interest litigation where person is unconcerned about, he is simply vindicating at the instance of poor and downtrodden masses, and person who is in a slight sense in a representative capacity. It is almost, of course, the basic formalities of representative action as contemplated under Order 1 Rule 8 is not being followed in such cases, because the constitutional courts are not supposed to follow CPC because of Section 141 explanation. Honorable Justice Thakkar is well aware that explanation to Section 141 of CPC clearly says that the CPC procedure of CPC will not govern the writs filed under Article 226 and 227. So though not strictly going by the provisions of representative action, they are broadly in the nature of representative action, but court do not insist for those formalities of Order 1 Rule 8. Of course, in many high courts, in Gujarat High Court, there is a specific rule, or even High Court also, 226 petition or 227, I think it may not be possible in the representative capacity, but 226 petition can also be in a representative capacity. There is a rule under the High Court rules also, but not stating much on this aspect. I am simply trying to bring a small distinction and to request all of you to focus on this aspect and convince courts whenever you are pitted with a question that you have no locus standi, and if you are genuinely pursuing a litigation as a taxpayer of that locality or of that city, then you cannot be said no by the court that you have no locus standi. Now, what we are talking in 2020, interestingly, probably Honorable Justice Thakkar would be aware of this judgment. In fact, in 1898, more than 120 years back, the locus standi of taxpayer has been accepted in the case of Yaman versus Sholapur municipality, which is reported in 1898 Indian Law Reporter, volume 22, Bombay, page 646. In that case, the ratepayers or taxpayers locus standi has been accepted. It has been said that if the public fund, which is vested in the municipality, the public coffer is created out of the public contribution. And if there is a grievance of a taxpayer or a ratepayer, that public this fund is likely to be misused by any these authorities, then they are even entitled to injunctive relief in ordinary suits. So what we are still debating day in and day out in courts about the locus standi, if you refer to this Yaman versus Sholapur municipal reported in 1898, you would realize the broad mindset of the judges, that they have understood that public authorities are bound. They have no unfettered discretion. They will have to go by the statutory provisions. They cannot misuse the public fund. And if that is being misused, then person can approach even ordinary court for injunctive relief. Now, this is 1898. Now, Justice Chagla's judgment in 1949, that is in Bombay Municipal Corporation versus Govind Lakshman. It is reported in AIR 1949 Bombay, page 299, if I am not mistaken. So that is the page where Justice Chagla was again confronted with this kind of litigation where public fund by municipality, the grievance was by the ratepayer that it is being misused, and therefore as a ratepayer or taxpayer, his locus standi should be accepted. And Justice Chagla examined this aspect and said that yes, as a ratepayer, we would not say that you have no locus standi. If public fund is being misused, you will have a sufficient interest to maintain appropriate proceedings before the competent court. So again, they have followed this Yaman judgment. Then comes Supreme Court judgment in 1974 in K. Ramdas Shinoy. Honorable Justice Thakkar knows he has authored writs and constitutional remedies as an author. He must have seen this K. Ramdas Shinoy versus UDP municipality. There again, in 1974, AR 1974 Supreme Court, page number 2215 probably. So in that case, the issue was that a particular license was given for construction of Kalyanam Mandapam cum lecturer hall. Now, the municipality suddenly, at the instance of somebody or goaded by extraneous consideration, a resolution was passed that, okay, this is meant for Kalyanam Mandapam and lecture hall, but now we will authorize it to be converted into a cinema theater. And one person, being a resident of this UDP municipality, thought it fit to approach the competent court before the High Court. And then the issue arose whether he had a locus standi or not. So ultimately, Supreme Court examined the aspect. The Supreme Court even relied upon the judgment of the probably this Sholapur municipality and this Bombay High Court judgment and Madras High Court judgment in Varadarajan versus Salem municipality. All these are instances of public law litigation. where locus standi, rule of locus, strict insistence of locus standi is liberalized, and locus standi is conferred to a person who is a ratepayer, who is ordinary citizen of. Therefore, in this, ultimately the resolution of the municipality was quashed and set aside by the court, saying that under the municipal rules, this is a residential area where cinema theater is not permissible under the rules, and therefore construction of a cinema theater, a lecture hall, or Kalyan Mandakavam was a different thing which was permitted, but this purely commercial activity was never contemplated under the law, and therefore the resolution was quashed and set aside. So this is how I propose to view and distinguish public interest litigation and public law litigation. And just 2 points more, that as I said, that Supreme Court has said that lawyers should not indulge. They should not file litigation, public interest litigation in personal name. And second kind of litigation which has been weeded out by the Supreme Court is in service matters. Service jurisprudence, no public interest litigation should be entertained. So with this, I am indeed obliged to Honorable Justice Thakkar, who has given his insights on this very important topic. I am really grateful to him for giving this knowledge to us. And with this, I would like to conclude the session. And I hope that whenever every lawyer is confronted with the concept of locus standi, there are large number of, starting from Fertilizer Kamgar Union and ending up to this Balwant Singh Chappal's case, and there are all cases where locus standis have been accepted. So with this, I conclude, and I hope that this session would be useful to all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Aseem. There are 3 questions that have already been posted on the chat box. One is, it gives a different niche. Kajal Chand says, what is the distinction between a public interest litigation and a social action litigation?
Yes, these are actually, if Justice Thakkar can say, I think they are interchangeable. Social action litigation and public interest litigation, class action litigations.
See, in fact, it is said that public interest litigation is attributable in that sense larger interest of public. Similarly, social action litigation also society. So virtually, as it is said, interchangeable. Sometimes you use particular expression, public interest litigation or social action litigation. Only thing is that there is no personal interest element therein in neither PIL nor SAL.
Thank you, sir. So I would just like to ask, like Mr. Aseem Pandya has given already the insights. What is your take on public law litigation, Mr. Thakkar? Justice Thakkar, I'm asking, like I said, Mr. Pandya has given us a good insights on public law litigation. What is your take? Anything you wanted to add on public law litigation?
No, in fact, according to me, see, public law litigation, meaning thereby that normally it is adversarial litigation. And in adversarial litigation, it is A and B who are interested in litigation. As regards public law is concerned, where something public, the element of public comes in. In fact, if you are aware in that Bhimsen and all those cases, particularly in that habeas corpus petition. See, in habeas corpus petition, what court used to do earlier was that whenever a complaint is made that a person is wrongfully detained under preventive detention or wrongfully imprisoned under the, say, punitive detention, punitive laws, then he can go to a court of law and seek, either he himself or through his next friend, that grant appropriate relief so that I can release. Now, sometimes it was abused, meaning thereby that sometimes it happens that some floor test, either at panchayat level or municipality level or legislature level. So for a few days, a person is taken in custody. Meanwhile, that exercise is undertaken, and thereafter immediately he was released because the purpose is served. When the matter went to the Supreme Court said that as far as legal writ remedies are concerned, it is not in the realm of private law remedies, but public law remedies. And whenever there is public law remedy, if there is abuse of power on the part of the authority, then we will pass an appropriate order and we will take action. And in several cases, if you are aware, in spite of the fact that a person is already released, the courts have granted compensation or damages to them or to other relatives, etc. So this is, the court said that exercise power under Article 226 or exercise of power under Article 32 is in the realm of public law remedy. It is not between A and B. And in such circumstances, we will not tolerate if we are of the opinion or if we are convinced that the power is abused by the authority. So this is how the courts have passed out.
This is to Mr. Aseem Pandya. Any format for public interest litigation, like any format for public interest litigation?
Yeah, certainly. Every High Court has now prescribed the format.
Yes.
Every High Court rules have provided from the format.
They're invariably on the website also.
Format only. Because of that Balwant Singh Chaufal's judgment, the judgment was directed to be circulated to every registry, and every High Court was directed to frame rules.
Invariably, large number have also uploaded on the website also. What
Yes.
are the rules, regulations? You can check that.
Yes.
This is by Banag Vidhan. This question is more pointed towards Justice Thakur. It says number of bills have been moved before the Supreme Court are not admitted, with directions that such bills should be first moved before the High Court. Considering that certain issues have been national and not just state remediation, should Supreme Court be more liberal in admitting such bills? But that's a personal question. You can give your insights because that's not a legal issue.
The only thing is that normally the courts also will say that first you go to the High Court under Article 226, and if you are not able to get the proper relief, and if you are still aggrieved, thereafter you may come to it. But normally, whenever a person approaches the Supreme Court, he will also invoke some of the fundamental rights. Then it is for the Supreme Court to either to grant relief or not.
Lawyer Shivaji, where can you check whether any bill were already stands filed on the same issue, the topic on which one is thinking of filing a bill, and why only High Court has bill jurisdiction, not the district courts?
What? I did not bail.
So three questions are basically divided. He says, is there any mode to detect whether the bill has been filed? Number one. Number two, why the jurisdiction has only been vested to the High Court? I also say Supreme Court, and not to the district courts.
Let me just answer this.
Yes, sir.
Originally, sir, first.
You can tell.
Please elaborate, sir.
In fact, the framers of the Constitution have made provision that power can be conferred on district court also. Now, it is true that so far it has not been given, but in the future it can be given also. Only thing is that as far as Supreme Court is concerned, the highest court of the country, and thereafter at the state level, framers of the Constitution at that point of time thought it fit that certain powers, say for example, issuance of writs, orders, and direction must be conferred on high courts. But provision has already been made with regard to district court, and in future it can be exercised also.
So this is on the Facebook by Nitish Kumar Singh Chauhan. Can any petition initially filed as a writ petition, as the petitioner is also an affected person, without following the directions issued in Balwant Singh Chauhan case, be converted into bill, considering the broader spectrum the writ petition is espousing? The petition is genuine and not a busy body or a person meddling with nature.
Actually, let me give one example of myself. I have filed one petition in respect of abuse of fund by one particular corporation, and the person has nothing to do with it. He was simply a local resident of it. And I entitled that petition as ordinary litigation because I am not filing, because PIL has categorized that these kind of petitions will be considered as PIL. So what option was left? So I said that as a ratepayer, I have a locus standi, and therefore I am filing this. Ultimately, the court appreciated, but ultimately the matter was placed before the Honorable Chief Justice for passing appropriate order, whether it should be treated as individual litigation or public interest litigation. I was of the firm view that it is a litigation of public nature, so public law litigation. It was not purely because as a ratepayer, I have interest to see that fund of local municipality is not wasted or abused. So to that extent, it cannot be termed as public interest litigation stricto sensu. Therefore, I have entitled it as a special civil application. But then after some hearing, the Honorable High Court said that we will direct it to be placed before Chief Justice and let Chief Justice pass appropriate order, whether it should be heard as ordinary petition or it should be treated as PIL. So now by order, it has been treated PIL. I will not brand it as a PIL.
See, in fact, what even in past, say for example, 1968-69, when I started practice about 1 year or so, if you are aware, a part of run of Kutch was given to Pakistan by Indian government. And a lawyer who was practicing, he was practicing in Gujarat High Court, Mr. Patel, M.I. Patel. He filed a petition stating that I am resident of Gujarat. A part of Gujarat is given, run of Kutch, that is part of Gujarat, was given by Indian government to Pakistan government, and which is illegal. The court heard the matter. It was said that he has no locus standi, and the court said that no, he has locus standi, and the court told, of course, on merits, this was holding that as far as war, if you are aware of, if the students and lawyers are aware of fundamental principles of international law, they must be aware that in certain matters, domestic or it is known as municipal courts have no jurisdiction. And those, they relate to war, treaty, neutrality, etc. Now, if there is a treaty between two sovereign countries, that is India and Pakistan, and in pursuance of those treaties or those decisions, if something is done, then domestic court, that is Indian courts, have no jurisdiction. The matter went to the Supreme Court also, and Supreme Court also, as far as locus standi is concerned, Supreme Court said that no, a person can challenge. And again, they say that as far as treaty is concerned, then the court will not exercise the power. So it was liberally construed in certain cases, even at that point of time.
That question has been again repeated. Can it be found out by any way that whether the public interest litigation was filed on the same topic, if one is trying to file another public interest litigation?
Now, because of softwares, I think it would be possible, because now as per the new rules, even person has to make that efforts, whether on the same subject any previous public litigation has been filed or not, and what is the status of that report, what is the status of that petition. So he is supposed to make a specific statement as per the new rules, whether in the past PIL has been filed on the same subject or not. So because of this technological advancement, I think software can fetch this kind of information probably.
More just like what we do in thesis work also, they try to find a yes. With the application as to whether that work has been earlier done or not, or whether it has been copied, etc. More akin to that. Yes. This question is by Dharmendra. He says, what are public utility services, and can these public utility services be taken up in the representative capacity?
See, in fact, public interest litigation means generally public are interested. Therefore, it may, as it is said in the Justice Dalveer Bhandari's judgment, there are several, say, fields, and it may be relating to environment, it may relate to, say, rights of little Indians, or it may be political also, because political also there may be abuse of power, and in such circumstances the court may pass an appropriate order. Only thing is that it must be real public interest. If it is not real public interest, then court should not interfere, and generally they are not interfering.
So your call is that the courts invariably sieve the wheat from the chaff. I said that the courts invariably sieve the wheat from the chaff to determine that. That is the basic principle applied.
No, but it is generally, the judges are also aware. And generally, judges also know what is really a person has come, why he has come, what is the, that is why it is said that who are you, what are you in life, that is, what are you doing? And all these questions also will go to show whether the person has come, whether it is bona fide litigation or not.
This is, he has sent a message privately, Mr. Jayant Panda. He says, can the exact procedure step by step be explained in detail as to how to file a public interest litigation and handle, so that the students of law who are not having knowledge can understand the same?
See, there cannot be any straitjacket, according to me. There should not be any straitjacket formula. Ultimately, it depends upon the facts and circumstances of each case. And whenever a case comes before the court would immediately understand, prima facie, that yes, the person has come for, say, ventilation of certain grievances, personal nature or public nature, or what is his object. And accordingly, the court will pass an appropriate order.
And therefore, epistolary jurisdiction was evolved by the Supreme Court, that even letters, so no formalities were insisted when genuine public cause is there. So letters were treated, news reports were treated as public interest litigation. There are n number of such instances where Supreme Court has not adhered to, or has insisted, or High Court has never insisted for formalities to be undertaken. So usually, if it's a genuine cause, the format, as I said, that now it is prescribed. But if you are requesting the court to take exercise suo motu action, at least you should write a letter from which the Chief Justice can find out whether the cause is justiciable and whether it's a genuine cause or not.
In the courts are sometimes not insisting for affidavit, but in certain cases, the courts will say that, yes, you file affidavit so that you are answerable. So whenever there is some doubt in the mind of the court may pass such order also, that put it on affidavit so that appropriate proceedings can be initiated against you if ultimately it is found that what you have stated is not correct. And that is necessary also.
So in fact, nowadays they have started filing the paras also, that how you are public spirited, what are your inputs earlier to the society. And
correct.
And you have to specifically state that you have no interest clashing with this same. So this is by Nitish. Probably Mr. Pandya would be able to handle it. Can any petition initially filed as a writ petition not in compliance with the directions issued by the Balwant Singh Chafal be converted into appeal, considering the broader spectrum the writ petition seems to espouse? This is probably what you have covered earlier.
I gave an exact instance where I myself has done like this, because I was of the view that as a taxpayer, he is interested. So it cannot be in that broad or strict sense, it is a public interest litigation. It can be considered as a class action litigation or representative type of action where court would not be formally insisting for that procedure of Order 1 Rule 8. But I was simply saying that as a taxpayer, I have a locus standi. I am not filing as a public interest litigation. But when court puts a query, then you will have to justify and convince the honorable judge concerned. And if the honorable judge is convinced on your arguments, he may treat it as an individual petition. And if he finds that some larger question is involved, which affects not only individually, but it is affecting some segment of society, then he may treat it as a PIL and transfer it to the concerned court also, with a request to the Chief Justice to pass appropriate order.
And in fact, at least in our High Court, we have seen that judges sometimes after reading the newspaper takes a suo motu cognizance and they place it before the Honorable the Chief Justice for passing of the action, and invariably that is named at court on its own motion.
Suo motu, yes.
Yes, that is, see, that is possible also. As I had told you, in that sense, Justice M.P. Thakkar's that writ petition which was decided, it was a newspaper report. Only thing is that before treating is a writ petition or before passing some order, the judge must realize that yes, it requires something is to be done. But now, as it is said, now the power is now with the Chief Justice, and it will be placed by the registry before the Honorable the Chief Justice, and the Honorable Chief Justice will pass the order. Because otherwise, what will happen? Many judges, some may say that I want to take this view, other bench may take a different view, and if all are taking, say, judicial notice of some newspapers and some news, then it may create difficulty. That is why now it is to some extent systematized.
So that's what I'm saying. At least in our high courts, the courts have been doing that. The judge, let's assume, takes a cognizance, then he says that it's a public interest litigation. Therefore, though I've taken the cognizance, I'm placing it before the Honorable the Chief Justice for placing it before the appropriate bench. Though invariably the roster lies before the Chief Justice or the first puisne.
See, normally my experience is the two high courts, Chief Justice of two high courts and Supreme Court, normally such matters are taken by the Chief Justice. But sometimes it is given to other judges also. There is no problem at all.
Yes, sir. In our cases also, sometimes these matters are listed before the first puisne.
Yes, correct.
So one has posted on the WhatsApp, because some people know the WhatsApp also. He says, what is the distinction between a class action and a representative action?
Ultimately, there also, see, representative action may be class action, or class action may be representative in nature. The main question is, whatever comes before the court, whether it is in the nature of public at large, does not mean that all persons are interested. A class also may be interested, say for example, labor class. Then in that case, the court may pass an appropriate order entertaining it and granting relief.
And what Mr. Pandya was saying, that common cause, whether the common writ could be filed. If Mr. Pandya would be recollecting, there was a judgment of A.N. Pathak versus Union of India, wherein they took cue from the CPC 1987 Supreme Court, wherein they said, yes, a common writ petition having same cause of action, a joint writ petition would be maintainable. It primarily dealt with that as to whether a joint writ petition could be maintainable once there is the same cause.
I would request everyone to read one of Allahabad full bench judgment, Umesh Chand versus State of UP, that is probably reported in AIR 1984, page 46. It's a classic judgment whether joint writ petition by more than one person can be filed or not. And there is a judgment of the Gujarat High Court also, Dinesh Bhai Chaturbhai Patel versus State of Gujarat, which is probably reported in 1975 GLR page 8, where a common cause is there, where common notification affecting large number of persons. Then in that case, a common petition can be filed by more than one person. So taking analogy from Order 1, Rule 1 of CPC, it also permits when you have a common grievance and common cause, you cannot just try to bring different causes together by filing a common petition. If a grievance is common, if the same notification, you are affected by the same notification or same cause of action, then a joint petition, we have filed petition on behalf of 100 persons where there is a encroachment removal drive, or some sort of such litigations where by common order something is being done. So these two judgments, I think one must read this judgment of the Allahabad High Court full bench, Umesh Chand versus State of UP, AIR 1984, Supreme Court, page 46.
In fact, before more than a century, the Civil Procedure Code 1882 and 1908, they have taken care of this situation. There should not be misjoinder of causes of action. There should not be misjoinder of parties. In fact, they have taken everything into account.
the insights given by Justice Thakur shows that why his book on CPC is so popular. And before we went live with the session, Mr. Pandya, I was discussing with him. He said that yes, during this lockdown, he's revising those editions, and the earlier books are already widely popular.
In fact, one allegation of some lawyers is, and to some extent they are not wrong, they say that this writ petition business and everything, it has so much increased that lawyers now do not know much about, I don't say do not know, but much about Code of Civil Procedure. Because here, so far as pleadings are concerned, very liberal so far as writ petitions are concerned. But they must study, and strict rules of civil procedure code would not apply to writ petition, as it is said, even explanation to section 141 says so. But I say that they must read and they must digest all provisions of Code of Civil Procedure first, yes, even for writ petitions also.
Yes.
In lighter vein, the lawyers practicing on the constitution, they say, if you are good on facts, argue on facts. If good on law, then argue on law. If nothing, then argue on constitution. So the session, as usual, as I said earlier, we have heard Mr. Thakur. We were not that fortunate to appear before him, before the High Courts or the Supreme Court. But the YouTubes and the whatever videos are available on the Google, they actually had shown the insights. But once you hear a person of immense knowledge personally, that actually gives a different spirit to the mind, that yes, what you have seen, because live answering to the questions shows the immense knowledge, and the books he has written also shows that. And as I said, the common factor between both of them was that except that Justice Thakur was a judge also, that both are legal luminaries in his both ways. Number two, both are avid readers, avid speakers, eloquent speakers, and they're also writing the books. And now I can vouch upon that. They're also quite frequent on the webinars to give insights to the students of law, lawyers, and the judges. On behalf of Beyond Law CLC, we are thankful that both of them had accepted our invite, and the insights given by them are definitely going to be helpful to all students, lawyers, and persons on the judicial side. As we have been saying that we are holding webinars on different perspectives of law and beyond law, which could help the society to move in a positive direction during these dark days. Tomorrow we have a webinar on evolution of pollution law in India by Justice K. Ramakrishnan, former judge of the Kerala High Court, and now he's a judicial member of the NGT. So stay connected for further updates of the webinars being conducted by Beyond Law CLC. We have already posted the mobile number for the updates and Facebook page and Instagram page. And these all videos, even today's one, will be uploaded on the YouTube channel. And you can also watch it on the Facebook, because these all recordings will be there. Thank you, everyone, and especially to Justice C.K. Thakur, who has been kind enough to give us the insights live. That gives us a different flip. And Mr. Pandya, who helped us to connect with Mr. C.K. Thakur, we are obliged two ways. Number one, that he acceded to our request to come on the platform. And secondly, to help us to connect to a person who is not only known for his judgments, his oratorship, his knowledge through books, as well as giving insights on the platform. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay blessed, and stay happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.